Hello, this is Paul. It's July 2018, and the question is, why are most blacks in America Democrats? I'm not saying they're all black, but most of them are. And when I say black, I'm going to talk about white. I'm not in any sense trying to be disrespectful. But I do want to address the question, why are most blacks Democrats? Do you know that before the Civil War, Democrats believed in the freedom of choice to own slaves? Today they believe in the freedom of choice to murder unborn babies. How blind can Democrats be? The Republican Party was formed in February of 1854 to oppose slavery. And Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. Why are most blacks Democrats? Republicans abolished slavery. Democrats supported it. Republicans gave blacks the vote. Democrats tried to keep it away. Republicans passed the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Democrats opposed it. The first black Republican was elected to the Senate, U.S. Senate, in 1871, but the first black Democrat over 100 years later, 1999. Did you know that on March the 6th, 1857, the Supreme Court, made up of 7 Democrats and 7 of the 9 justices were Democrats, they gave the bigoted Dred Scott decision, there's a picture of him to the right, that he was property belonging to his owner. Today, many Democrats hold to the nonsense philosophy of evolutionism, that man was not created by God, but evolved up from slime, over millions of years, of course. In the past, many believed blacks to be inferior to whites because blacks, in their minds, was closer to the apes. Darwin himself saw the Negro as, what he termed the Negro, or blacks, as being midway between the gorilla and the Caucasian, as he put it. This is such a slander against blacks. Blacks, by the way, are really not black. They're brown. Whites actually tan themselves to become browner. I have in my files a book by Margaret Sanger. She's the founder of Planned Parenthood. Let's learn about her. The book was published in 1917, long before I was born. But I inherited it from my father, who had 5 earned degrees, 1 Columbia, Harvard, Boston, Toronto, McMaster. One of his comments, this is handwritten in the book that I found, was in response to someone Sanger was promoting, Havelock Ellis. On page 119, my dad wrote, handwritten, "His evolutionary bias vitiates this whole section. Amen, Dad." Look at those words of Margaret Sanger down below. We want to exterminate the Negro population. And many people maybe will accuse me of being, I'm going to actually let you see the letter in a later slide. But in any case, there's a picture of my dad on the left with a family that he was a pastor, and that was a family that he ministered to. There is good reason to believe that the founder of KBM, that's my term, Killing of Babies Machine, and we call it Planned Parenthood, the founder of it, namely Margaret Sanger, was even further to the left than Democrats. According to the Margaret Sanger Papers Project, she, quote, voted for the extreme left, the Socialist Party. And there you have the quotation, one of the quotations from Margaret saying, "The most merciful thing that the large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it." And notice on the bottom right there, there's some arms from an aborted child with a dime. Now, there's an article I published, I think it was 1992. It's entitled Evolution and the American Abortion Mentality. My dad, in what he wrote, was right on. Many people today, however, don't seem to realize that the same poisonous philosophy, evolutionism, that justified killing under Hitler and also Stalin, was infected by the American abortion mentality and democratic thinking, or has infected both. For example, the evolutionary guru Carl Sagan, who put together the Cosmos program, which was popular on TV decades ago, he encouraged the fiction that life in the womb traces an evolutionary history. In other words, at some points in the womb, the baby that is developing is really not even human. It's some evolutionary precursor or something, which is nonsense. Now I'm going to quote from him. "We must decide," he wrote, "what distinguishes a human being from other animals and when, during gestation, the uniquely human qualities, whatever they are, emerge." He compared the appearance of the developing embryo to a, quote, segmented worm, and added that something like the gill arches of a fish or an amphibian become conspicuous, and there is a pronounced tail, end of quote. The face becomes reptilian, then somewhat pig-like. Eventually it resembles the primates, but is still not quite human. Now, in that article to the right, I actually give the exact documentation where I quoted that from. You can get it. Or write to me and I'll send it to you as an email attachment. All this evolutionary nonsense supposedly justifies abortion, the extinction of babies in the womb, because supposedly they are subhuman. The science of genetics, however, confirms that the human embryo is fully human from the moment of conception. In the same book that I was referring to, Sanger quoted approvingly the evolutionary words of Havelock Ellis, quote, "Today," and this is Ellis, "all classes in the community, save the lowest and most unfit, exercise some degree of forethought and control in regulating the size of their families. That it should be precisely the unfit who procreate in the most reckless manner is a lamentable fact. But it is not a hopeless fact, and there is no need for the desperate remedy of urging the fit to reproduce themselves in this manner to the level of the unfit." Now there is a person to the right who arguably was or is the best gymnast in the world. She was born in 1997 from an unfit drug-addicting mother and abandoned by her father. She was a prime Planned Parenthood perfect target. In her book, A Woman and the New Race, Sanger wrote, "The most merciful thing that the large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it." And I think I give the documentation down there at the bottom. But King Jesus, author of all life, said that the thief only comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but that he came that they might have life and might have it abundantly. Why vote for killers and destroyers? What some may not realize is that the same poisonous philosophy that infected Hitler also infected Margaret Sanger. Now I'm going to quote her. She said that Charles Darwin observed, quote, that we do not permit helpless human beings to die off, but we create philanthropies and charities, build asylums and hospitals, and keep the medical profession busy preserving those who could not otherwise survive. Her view was that such philanthropies and charities were ameliorative at best, and that some so-called benevolences were, quote, positively injurious to the community and the future of the race. Her following words sound like they could actually have been uttered by murdering Adolf Hitler. Quote, and this is quoting Sanger, "The most serious charge that can be brought against modern benevolence is that it encouraged the perpetuation of defectives, delinquents, and dependents. These are the most dangerous elements in the world community, the most devastating curse on human progress and expression." You don't need planes flying into a building to destroy, but there are many Democrats that are 100% behind the so-called right for a woman to kill her child, but the child, that little baby girl that's inside, has no right at all. Now here's a quotation. I promised that I would show you the letter. And Linda Gordon, in her book, A Woman's Body, Woman's Right, and I give you the documentation of the reference there, Margaret Sanger wrote to Clarence Gamble in 1939, quote, and you can actually see it sort of, it's not, I don't give the full letter, but the critical part that I'm about to read now is there. "We do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out the idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members." Many years prior, Sanger affirmed, and this is from that report of the 5th International Neo-Malthusian and Birth Control Conference, 1922. She said, and it's in that book, I saw it, "Whether or not the white races will be ultimately wiped off the face of the earth depends, in my mind, largely upon the conduct and behavior of the white people themselves." And apparently there was an applause because the word is in that book. It suggests that her audience, hearing her, very much appreciated those racist words. Why do blacks vote Democrat when Democrats kill little black babies? Don't little black babies matter? Birth control for Sanger was, quote, "nothing more or less than the facilitation of the process of weeding out the unfit." A eugenicist, she defined the field as, quote, "the attempt to solve the problem from the biological and evolutionary point of view." That's exactly what Hitler wanted to do. To save the fit, Aryan Germans, and kill the unfit, Jews, for example, in his mind. She wanted to change things to the construction and evolution of humanity itself. She was a religionist, believed in naturalism. She hoped for a motherhood that would refuse to bring forth weaklings. Such a motherhood, quote, "withholds the unfit, brings forth the fit." She wrote of women's upward struggle and describes the lack of balance between the birth rate of the unfit and the fit as the greatest present menace to civilization. Why are most blacks Democrats? The Lord Jesus Christ sanctified life in the womb by living there himself for 9 months. As the promised seed of the woman, found in Genesis 3:15, he came to rescue daughters like those for whom Margaret Sanger expressed concern throughout her writings from their burdens of pain, suffering, sin, and death. She promoted a false Jesus, and I'm quoting her, a Jesus who would not die upon the cross. She chose the hollow shell of evolutionary, quote, science. Jesus' teachings about the future, contrary to Margaret Sanger's preachings, were neither, and I'm using her terminology, vague sentimental fantasies, nor pathological, and they will never atrophy, using her terminology. Save black babies and white babies, too. I have another video that I put up, Aborting America and Kermit Gosnell. He was a medical doctor in Philadelphia. He's still alive as far as I know. In fact, I think I wrote him a letter. He's never responded to it. But I did read that book on the right. And that's the building in Philadelphia where atrocities took place. Now that woman to his right on the upper left there, she died as a result of a botched abortion in that clinic. And many of the children, look at that child that was killed soon after being born into the world. In other words, it wasn't even partial birth, killing the baby when it's halfway out. It's all the way out, and then snipping the spinal cord. So it's called Aborting America and Kermit Gosnell. If you want to look at that one, you are welcome to. Now, I mentioned this is July 2018. Just recently, there was a wonderful pro-life Supreme Court victory. An embarrassing defeat for progressive socialists, in other words, Democrats. They were trying to force pro-life groups in California to also promote abortion. Well, the Supreme Court said, no, they don't need to promote abortion. That would violate their religious convictions. And I found that picture of Sanger with a Hitlerian mustache on the Google images, and I said, well, I might as well put it up. Now here I am. There's 3 pictures of me, believe it or not, in this picture. When I was in Africa, I had the privilege of preaching in that church building in Pointe-Noire, Republic of Congo. And there's the man down at the bottom there. His name is Francois, and he actually, I preached it in French, and he actually helped me. I went through the sermon with him maybe 3 or 4 times. And after it was all over and I preached it and so on, he said essentially that I did a good job. He said that my French was about 18 or 19 out of 20, but that the sermon was 22 out of 20. And there are 2 other men on either side of me, Viodo and Jean-Serge, both of whom live in Vili, natives of Republic of Congo, and there I am in one of the churches, outdoor service this time, preaching. That time I preached in English and it was translated.